Hello and welcome to Eastern Horizon. We are live on Facebook, X, and Twitter. You are watching the live streaming of Eastern Horizon. The United States, Russia, and Ukraine are meeting in Abu Dhabi on the possible peace negotiation and the peace talk on Russia-Ukraine conflict. So there are high-level meetings going on, and Abu Dhabi is the host who has taken this initiative to initiate this dialogue. For a possible outcome between the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we have been witness that such meetings and the rounds has been taking place into the different places. But what is expected outcome or what is the final outcome? There is a lot of the speculation and the curiosities. To discuss this in a very scholar way and to understand that what exactly means such kind of the dialogues. I have joined a very seasoned political analyst and political scientist, Dr. Zlatko Haji Dev, and he joined me from Sarajevo. He is also the author of the book Nations and Capital: The Missing Link in Global Expansion. Thank you very much, Dr. Zlatko Hadzidedic.
Hadzidedic. Thank you very much for having me.
My player, and thank you very much that you accepted a request to speak on this topic.
Well, let's try to say something.
Sure.
It's a
So
topic
let me.
that,
Yes, exactly. So let
yes,
me know that we saw that there have been different rounds of these peace negotiation. Every time it comes and but there is nothing something concrete coming out from such kind of the meeting. So being an author of Nations and Capital and observing also, Balkans have a very big role in such kind of the I think that the conflict. You have the experiences, you have watched many things. So how you analyze these meetings and their possible comes out?
well, everyone is trying to achieve their own goals. Primarily, the US is trying to create a situation in which President Trump would be a peacemaker. And I think that they are more or less pressed by the current situation at home and other circumstances in the world to create a success of these negotiations. But on the other hand, the fact is that these negotiations are not political. They are led by the heads of military intelligence on the Russian side and the head of the National Council for Security and Defense on the Ukrainian side. So certainly, they are not going to produce political outcomes, no definite outcomes. More or less, we can predict that they will reach uh, a kind of success on the level of prisoner exchanges and things like that. But on the other hand, uh, I would say that the primary goal on the Russian part is to buy some additional time. They expect the Ukrainian military to collapse in this year, although they occupy only 20% of the Ukrainian territory. They have chosen to lead a war of attrition with Ukraine, and they expect that Ukraine will be short of its own resources to wage a further war during this year. And their ultimate goal is to actually create a situation of a fractured state for Ukraine, in which Ukraine will not be able to become a part of NATO. So I think that those people who think that Russia is obsessed with occupying Ukrainian territory and ceding parts of territory from Ukraine are deeply mistaken. Russia has enough of its own territory. it's a real empire. They don't really need this devastated part of Ukrainian land for uh, any kind of territorial gains, but they need it as a leverage to actually deprive Ukraine of its own false sovereignty, to make it a fractured state incapable of becoming a part of NATO or any other security arrangements that would be coming from the West. In
mm,
other
mm,
words, Russian goal is to create a buffer zone out of Ukraine. So not to occupy Ukraine, definitely, although some kind of capitulation by the Ukrainian military would be welcome on the Russian
mm,
part. But
mm,
on the other side, they do not really opt for that 100%. They probably prefer to create a fractured state that would be unable to be part of NATO. On the other side, Ukraine wants to preserve its own sovereignty and territorial integrity, which at this point I think is pretty unrealistic, at least in terms of territorial integrity. Russia has occupied 20% of the territory and is not going to surrender it to Ukraine, to give it back to Ukraine, because they simply intend to use it as a leverage. And as long as these positions are so far apart, there will be no breakthroughs, no
mm,
political breakthroughs. And I expect these negotiations to continue on this level, on the level of military experts, rather than on proper diplomatic representatives or political representatives on either side.
mm, mm. So let me come to this point that do you think that the United States is really serious and Donald Trump is really serious to end this war, or this is something like his political slogan, and he want to just use as a dual approach? One side he said that he is going to end this war, but on the other hand, I mean he is also have some sort of this mines and mineral plans in Ukraine. They have also a lot of mean that the expenses of the war, because the Donald Trump continuously saying that the US has spent more money on the war than Europeans. So these all game of interest of different stakeholders. So how you see that the US is serious in this war to end, or US is more serious than its financial benefit?
Well, I think it's a rather PR event for the US administration. I think that they prefer to surrender Ukraine to the Europeans and leave it to the Europeans to finance the rest of the war, if there will be a continuation of the war. And they simply want to depict Donald Trump as a peacemaker, about his obsession with Nobel Peace Prize and things like that. So
Mm,
obviously, this kind of slogan about Donald Trump as a peacemaker is in the background of this initiative too. Strategically speaking, I don't think that the US is going to remain present in this part of the world, meaning Eastern Europe and also the rest of Europe. Donald Trump
mm,
has expressed clear intention to withdraw from Europe, withdraw from NATO, to cut the expenses that the US used to have in the past defending Europe and leave Europe to its own fate. So I really do think that this is a kind of PR event that has to uh, create a gain on the level of you know domestic marketing and international marketing for Donald Trump rather than
mm.
in any kind of strategic sense.
Hmm. So, do you think that there is any major breakthrough that could expected from this meeting, or mean that there could be further such sessions or such kind of the meetings? So, mean that how this mean that of course it's a political rhetoric by the United States that U.S. is very serious to end this war, but how long Donald Trump can use this rhetoric as a face saving?
Well, I don't think that this kind of rhetoric can contribute a lot. It basically depends on the sides which negotiate, meaning Russia and Ukraine. The US has no leverage to make any degree of pressure either on Russia or on Ukraine. They do have some kind of leverage, but I'm not sure that they want to use it at any cost. So I really do think that it is a form of PR event. And the very format of the negotiations is something which does not promise any kind of breakthrough. It is a meeting of experts who are going to discuss the security issues, how to stabilize the front line, how to exchange prisoners, how to create future conditions for either of the countries or for both countries to uh, retain their security. So it's something which does have strategic importance, but does not have the capacity of making a breakthrough. It is something which politicians must do eventually, if
Mhm.
given a
So,
mandate.
indeed, indeed. So where you see Europe in all this scenario, because Europeans are quite critical towards Donald Trump, Russia-Ukraine war peace deal. They have pretty much differences, especially on this Russian assets. Previously, we saw that on the Russian frozen assets, and that is in the Europe. I think that. So, how you see, and what is the mandate of Europe or European leaders on this Russia-Ukraine issue, and especially towards the recent tough time toward US. How you see European leaders?
Well, I think that they are deeply mistaken and they lack vision in the first place. They are not capacitated to create any kind of breakthroughs or to create any kind of visions that would contribute to the solution of the conflict. The only thing they know is that they should invest more money into the conflict to eventually try to bring Ukraine to victory, which is rather impossible at this point, and it's very unlikely, I have to say. Whatever we take it from whichever part, it's very unlikely. And it's just a waste of time and money on the part of the Europeans. But they suffer from terrible Russophobia, I have to say. All of that is a product of their Russophobia. They are obsessed with the idea that Russia is going to attack the rest of Europe and so on, although they have no historical examples of such things, except for the Soviet Union conquering Eastern Europe by defeating the Nazi Germany. Otherwise, Russia as an imperial power has never tried to conquer Europe. Quite the opposite. It was the Napoleonic conquests in Russia, the Nazi conquests in Russia, and all those attacks on Russia coming from Europe, which the Russians have experienced. So it was quite the opposite from what the Europeans are presenting these days. So I think that they should be much more realistic about the whole thing and realize that it is not in their interest to spend so much money, so much power and arms and to waste any Ukrainian lives for their own obsession to stop Russia in Ukraine. Because even if Russia were to conquer Ukraine, it will stop at the border of Ukraine. It will not go further. Russia has a clear interest to have a buffer zone between NATO and Russia, and they would use Belarus and Ukraine as a buffer zone. They would not go further. So, strategically speaking, Russia has no interest in conquering Europe. It is just a matter of European Russophobia that they are operating with these terms as Russian aggression and things like that. I think they are profoundly mistaken and they should become more realistic. You know, politics is about realism, it's not about obsessions.
Hmm. So recently, we also saw that the Europeans also thinking that the Europe should have reliance on their own security rather than the United States, because we saw that there was very tough speeches made by the European leaders, and then even Donald Trump, when he was in the Davos Forum, he also used because we saw the Greenland, what happened on the Greenland, and how the tariff, and then Donald Trump stepped back from this. So how you see that the do you think that the Europe is in position that they could have set up their own security without United States?
Well, theoretically, they can. It only takes a lot of money and a lot of time. It would take them 10 years to actually create a single military force operating in a single language and so on with a single command and so on. Right now, it's just a group of armies which operate separately even when within NATO they were just using military codes and English language coming from the US. So they would have to create something of their own. And probably Great Britain intends to become a replacement for the US. We can see that the British have these ambitions. Between the lines, we can read that the British intend to replace the US as a protector for Europe. Of course, they do not have the military power for that. They have military intelligence power to actually act like that, but do not have the military that would replace the US military. But together with French military, German military, the British military would eventually constitute a powerful force that would be able to protect Europe if necessary, but it takes time. I think that the first thing they need is a kind of realistic vision of what they actually need, what they are threatened by, whether they are really threatened by Russia or they are threatened by Donald Trump, who wants to conquer this, conquer that, whether they are threatened by British ambitions to control the rest of Europe and things like that. They need a realistic assessment of what they actually need, and that comes first before they start anything else.
Mhm. So my last question to you is this: that Donald Trump also recently make a trade, mean that the tariff deal with India, and in this deal there was some news that Indians will not buy the Russian oil. So Donald Trump also said this thing that if India will not buy the Russian oil, then it will help to have make the end of war between Russia and Ukraine. So how you think that this contrast and this comparison, that what the statement means, and how this statement could help that it could end the Russia-Ukraine war. Can you better analyze it?
Well, there is some point in that, I would say, because we know that the West thought that Russia would collapse under sanctions, and basically Russia's economy survived due to the exports to the East, primarily to India, including oil, or with oil in the first place. So by reducing the export to India, Russia will lose a relevant leverage for reconstituting their economy further, and it would probably weaken Russia's prospects to continue the war. But on the other hand, I would say that, Donald Trump cannot really use tariffs as a weapon, a military weapon practically, and at the same time claim to promote peace between Russia and Ukraine. He's directly acting against Russian interests, economic interests, but also against Russian control of its own resources. And then he pretends that he wants to achieve a sincere peace between Ukraine and Russia in goodwill. So it's not a goodwill if you are using tariffs as a leverage to control one side or to exert a pressure on one side and things like that. I think that the best way, I mean, the best outcome of such an initiative is not to have Russians at the table after all. I think that these two things cannot go together. Russians are participating at this conference because they need some technical solutions in the front line and so on, and they want to demonstrate that they want to negotiate. But at the end of the day, if such pressures through tariffs or something else continue, I don't think that Russia will have any, reason to continue sincere negotiations with Ukraine and with especially under the patronage of the US. They will try to achieve the victory in the war rather than to you know succumb to the pressure by the US, and then to promote the US administration as a peacemaker in addition. That's something which these two things don't go together, and I sincerely believe that the Russian um, that the Kremlin, if you like, that the Russian president and the Russian administration will not really provide the US with this kind of leverage to control both.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Thank you very much, Dr. Zalitko, Hadzidedic. I I really appreciate your time and
Yes.
your comments.
Thank you
And
very much for
we will
inviting me.
we will do we will do more with the Eastern Horizon. And I think that from Balkans, I think you are a very active voice. I really appreciate your thought and your comments. Thank you so much. And we're going to end this live streaming. So you can follow us on Eastern Horizon page. We have this Eastern Horizon Twitter, and you can also like us on the Facebook. And we need your support, your more sharing, your more likes, because we are trying to make a difference in geopolitics and the international relation. So keep in touch with us, and see you again on a new podcast. Thank you very much.